Ever get the feeling you can't quite pin someone down? Like you just can't figure out who they really are. That's kind of how I feel about Elon Musk right now, especially after going through all this stuff about his work with the U.S. government. I mean, we've got articles here, right, all about this thing called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, they call it.
Yeah, DOGE.
DOGE for short. Plus some background pieces, about Musk himself.
Hmm. You know what gets me? It's how polarizing he is.
Oh, totally.
Even among the people who actually like him.
Yeah.
You've got folks saying he's this revolutionary, right? Changing the world with Tesla, SpaceX.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side, there's this tendency he has to, let's just say, not always play by the rules. Makes you wonder if maybe his ambition goes a little too far sometimes.
For sure. I mean, one minute you see headlines about him like colonizing Mars, and the next it's all about accusations and, those interesting tweets of his.
Oh, yeah.
So, how do we put all that together? Is he really this force for good, or is there something, I don't know, a little darker underneath it all?
That's the million-dollar question, right? I mean, that's why we're here. To really understand what he's all about, we got to get into the details. I guess the best place to start is with this DOGE thing. What do they even do?
All right, so from what I read, DOGE was this thing, this department, created by President Trump.
Okay.
It was through something called an executive order.
Right.
Which basically means the president can just, decide things without having to go through Congress.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's how DOGE was born.
Interesting. So what was their whole deal?
Okay, so their whole purpose, the thing they were supposed to do, was make the government more, what's the word? Efficient. Yeah, efficient. By finding ways to cut spending.
Cutting spending, the government's favorite thing.
Right. And they were aiming for, get this, $1 trillion in savings. Can you believe that? $1 trillion.
Wow, that's pretty ambitious. $1 trillion. Where were they even going to find that kind of money?
Well, DOGE was given a lot of power, from what I understand. They could go in and really scrutinize different parts of the government, They started by analyzing federal contracts. Then they were looking into spending on those foreign aid programs like USAID.
USAID, right.
And then they even went after agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Wasn't there something about them finding, billions and billions of wasted money super fast?
Oh, yeah.
I vaguely remember a press conference, I think. Trump was, he was pretty excited about it.
Yeah, he was really touting it. Of course, no one ever really saw a breakdown of those numbers, but still, DOGE was definitely stirring things up. They even, get this, offered buyouts to federal employees. Here's some money, leave your job, gave them a deadline and everything.
Wow. So they weren't messing around.
Nope, not at all. But, surely not everyone was on board with all this, right? How did Congress react to having, Elon Musk, a private citizen, basically rocking the boat?
Well, it really depended on where you sat, politically speaking. You know how Congress is, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the Republicans, they were pretty happy about it all. They saw DOGE as this thing, this chance to finally, cut back government spending, shrink those federal agencies. They've been wanting that for a while.
Yeah, I bet there are some specific names that come up in the research about all this, right? Who is really pushing for DOGE?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You've got folks like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Aaron Bean, Blake Moore. They were all forming these pro-DOGE groups in Congress, even created subcommittees and caucuses.
Right, those are basically little groups within Congress.
Exactly.
And they all focus on specific issues.
Right.
And in this case, they were all about promoting government efficiency.
Exactly.
So a lot of support on the Republican side. What about the Democrats? Were they as enthusiastic?
Not so much.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them, sure, they admitted that, yeah, maybe there's some waste that could be cut, transparency could be better. But a lot of them, they were really worried about how DOGE was going about it.
They thought it was too much, too fast.
Yeah, exactly. They saw it as, I don't know, reckless almost, like they were dismantling important government stuff just to target agencies they didn't agree with.
So their argument was that it wasn't really about efficiency at all. It was more about pushing a specific agenda.
Yeah, basically. Actually, one representative, Val Hoyle, she even came out and said that Musk was using DOGE to, and I quote, line his own pockets and rip off Americans.
Wow.
Now, those claims, never really proven.
Right.
But it definitely shows how divided people were.
For sure. So Congress was pretty split on the whole thing. But even if we just set aside the politics for a second.
Okay.
Is it even realistic to think that DOGE could have actually made a serious dent in the federal budget? Most of the spending, right, it goes to things like Social Security, Medicare, and defense.
Exactly.
And those weren't really DOGE's targets.
That's a great point, and one a lot of critics brought up, how much could they really save by cutting I don't know, foreign aid or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, those are tiny slices of the whole budget pie.
So even if they found all the waste, fraud, and abuse like they claimed, it might not have even made much of a difference.
Right, exactly. And that's not even getting into some of the other criticisms. People were also worried about the fact that DOGE had access to, like, really sensitive information. The Treasury Department's payment system, for instance.
Wait, hold on. They had access to the system that handles all of the government's money?
Yeah,
Wasn't that like a huge red flag for
it
people?
was, for sure. And then there was the whole thing about, well, the people working at DOGE, they were young, a lot of them, some in their early 20s, even younger.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there was even a scandal where a DOGE staffer had to resign because of, well, some pretty racist stuff he posted on social media.
Oh, wow.
Made people wonder about the whole vetting process, you know? Like, was this thing just being run a little too fast and loose?
It sounds like even if you ignore the political fights, DOGE was already getting into some pretty ethically questionable territory.
Yeah.
And what about those lawsuits? Didn't a bunch of groups end up suing them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You had Democratic attorneys general, some NGOs, even the National Treasury Employees Union. They were all filing lawsuits.
What were their arguments?
Well, they were saying DOGE was overstepping its boundaries, violating federal law, maybe even putting people at risk.
It sounds like they were making a lot of enemies pretty quickly.
They were. So how did the White House respond to all this pushback?
Good question.
Basically, they just brushed it off, called the lawsuits frivolous, said their opponents were just trying to slow things down. It was clear the Trump administration was fully behind DOGE, no matter what.
So we've got a decent picture of DOGE and what they did, but to really unpack all this, we need to understand the guy running the show, right? What does Elon Musk's involvement in DOGE tell us about him and his, shall we say, unique approach to problems?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
Because, like we said at the start, the guy is a walking contradiction. On one hand, he's the hero, building amazing things with SpaceX and Tesla. But then you have this other side, this darker side, that keeps popping up.
Exactly. So to understand DOGE, we need to understand Musk.
Makes sense.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2. Welcome back.
All right, so we left off talking about how we need to understand Elon Musk if you really want to understand DOGE.
Exactly.
And that's tough, right? Because he's such a complex guy.
Yeah, he is.
So where do we even start?
Well, I think to really get him, we need to look at his politics.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, his political leanings are, let's just say, complicated.
Yeah, I've read articles where he calls himself an independent.
Uh-huh.
Says he's disillusioned of both parties.
Right, and he's been pretty vocal about criticizing what he sees as the extreme left. You know, too much government involvement, all that.
But then he also criticizes Republicans, especially on things like climate change.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like a simple left versus right kind of thing with him. I mean, he's buddy-buddy with Ron DeSantis, who's a Republican, and then there's this whole thing with Trump and DOGE. You'd think he was leaning right.
But then you have his stance on, like, sustainable energy and space exploration.
Right.
Those don't really fit neatly into either box. It's almost like he's making his own political lane.
I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, with Musk, sometimes his actions speak louder than words.
Definitely.
Take Tesla, for instance. He's basically made electric cars like a cool thing. Good for the environment, no question.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. But he's also been critical of some climate policies. Says he's skeptical about how urgent the problem is.
Right, which seems kind of contradictory.
Total.
And then you have this crazy plan of his to colonize Mars. Like, is that him being a visionary? Or is it more about the super rich trying to escape a planet they messed up?
It's almost like he's trying to fix problems that he's, like, benefiting from at the same time.
Right.
It's definitely a head scratcher.
It all comes back to this question, right? Does Musk really want to make the world a better place? Or is it more about him? You know, his legacy, his survival, all that.
So we've got this picture of Musk, and it's confusing. But how does all that connect to the real impact of DOGE? I mean, we talked about some of the problems, the controversies, but what about the long-term stuff?
Well, one of the big concerns is what DOGE did to government institutions.
Okay.
Their whole approach was about fast change, disruption,
Right.
buyouts, agencies getting dismantled. Critics were worried that this was going to, like, destabilize important government functions.
Like, in their rush to be efficient, they might actually make things worse.
Exactly. And then there's the whole power thing.
Okay.
DOGE basically handed Musk, a private citizen, tons of control over the government. And he'd never worked in government before.
So that raises questions about, like, accountability, right?
For sure. If something went wrong, who was to blame? DOGE was operating outside the normal checks and balances. It was hard to keep track of what they were doing, see what the long-term effects would be.
And we can't forget the ethical side of all this, right?
Absolutely.
They were all about cutting costs, but often that meant cutting services and programs that people really needed.
Yep. And remember those lawsuits we talked about? Those weren't just about legal stuff. They were about real people whose lives were being affected. And the White House, they just dismissed those concerns, called them legal shenanigans.
Just poured fuel on the fire.
Exactly.
It sounds like DOGE created a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, both for government workers and the people who relied on those services.
Yeah. And we should say, those legal battles, they're still going on.
Oh, wow.
How those cases turn out could have a big impact on how much power private citizens can have in government.
Okay, so we've got DOGE, this ambitious project with lots of controversy and potential long-term effects. But let's bring it back to Musk. What have we learned about him, his leadership?
Well, one thing that's clear is that he's obsessed with results. Ambitious goals, pushing his teams hard. He's not afraid to use unusual methods, and he expects everyone to work as hard as he does.
He's definitely a disruptor, and that can be good or bad depending on your perspective.
People have called his leadership style both visionary and tyrannical. Some people love working for him, others find him really difficult. He's brilliant, no doubt, but his people skills, not his strong suit.
It's funny, right? Those same things that make him successful, the drive, the ambition, the rule breaking, they also get him into trouble.
Yeah, it's a classic case of the ends justify the means. But the question is, how far is he willing to go? And who really benefits in the end?
So where does all this leave us? What are the main takeaways from our deep dive into Elon Musk and DOGE?
Well, I think it's obvious that DOGE, even though it's over now, it showed us some important things about government, about technology, about how much power one person can have.
And it made us think about what we're willing to sacrifice, right? In the name of progress, efficiency. Are we okay with giving up our values, our institutions, just to have a better future? And who gets to decide what that future looks like anyway?
Big questions. And we all have to answer them. This world is getting more and more complex, and Musk is a perfect example of that.
Definitely not simple answers. So as we wrap up part 2, we want you to think about these things. What do you think about Musk's leadership style? Was DOGE good or bad in the end?
And the big one, how is Elon Musk going to shape the future? Government, technology, our whole society. We'll be back soon for part 3, where we're going to look at the even bigger picture.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time with Elon Musk and DOGE.
We have.
Goals, controversies, the long-term stuff, but I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for you after all this?
You know, one thing that really strikes me is that DOGE, even with all the problems and how it ended, it kind of showed us something.
Yeah.
This big problem that's been around for a long time.
What's that?
The government and spending.
Oh, you mean how they spend money?
Yeah, like nobody was really paying attention, not until Musk came along and started doing things his way.
True, it's like nobody cared until he made it a big deal.
Exactly. And remember how they were saying, like, right away, billions and billions in waste.
Oh, yeah.
Got everyone talking. Even if we never saw the details, it forced people to think about government efficiency, which honestly was way overdue.
And you gotta admit, the guy knows how to get attention.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, remember that quote about deleting government agencies, the ones he called wasteful?
Provocative, for sure.
Yeah.
He's good at taking these complex things, making them simple, and then, like, tapping into how frustrated people are.
People are tired of feeling like their taxes are just poof, gone.
Exactly. And Musk, he gave them a voice.
He's a good storyteller, like really good. Electric cars, space, government. He knows how to make it exciting, how to get people on board.
Yeah, and that's powerful, especially when you've got the money and the influence he has. He can really control the conversation, even if his methods aren't always the best.
It's that saying you see with his companies, right? Tesla, SpaceX. He's pushing limits, but you always have to wonder what the cost, not just money, but ethically too.
Right. It's what makes him so interesting, right? This Musk paradox. Innovation, it's not good or bad by itself. It's a tool.
Depends how you use it.
Exactly. And with DOGE, we saw that good intentions, they can still have some pretty bad side effects.
So as we finish up, what should we keep in mind?
I think a few things. First, people are still arguing about DOGE.
They are.
Was it good? Bad? Historians are going to be debating that for a while.
For sure.
And second, Musk, he's going to keep being influential. Government, technology, he likes those big challenges.
So we can expect more surprises.
Oh, yeah. Bold moves, maybe some controversial ones.
Got to keep us on our toes.
And last thing, and this is important, people like Musk, they show us how important it is to, like, really think critically.
About what we're doing, where we're headed.
Right. New technologies, who's making them, what are their goals?
So basically, when it comes to Elon Musk, keep a healthy dose of skepticism handy.
Yeah.
Enjoy the cool stuff, but don't forget about the flaws. And always, always ask yourself, what's the impact of all this? On us, on the world.
Well said. It's been a great deep dive. A lot to think about.
Definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll be back soon with another deep dive, and we can't wait to explore something new with you then. Until then, stay curious.